Welcome to the future of ground transportation. Today we have a special guest, Mr. Mark Morse. Good morning, Mark. How are we doing today?
Good morning, Daniel. I'm doing fantastic. How are you doing?
Excellent, excellent. Thank you for joining the Future of Ground Transportation podcast, Mark. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you are, and your background, please.
Sure. So my name's Mark Morse. My company is Latitude, Longitude, and Logistics. We are a last mile company where we are contracted with Amazon to do that final destination to customers at their houses and businesses. Going into our fourth year, this December is typically our busiest time of year. So we're in the thick of all the holiday deliveries and increased business demands. Before I did that, I was in food service my entire life. I did that from my first job until just a few years ago. So big transition into the logistics industry.
So from food service to the logistics and transportation, how did you make that switch, Mark?
So, in food service, a lot of that is customer service based, and it's also a lot of, human resources dealing with employees and staff. And so that transition into logistics field where we have, a team of drivers, and managing them, that was where what made the transition easy is the people management factor. The actual, vehicles and moving goods was easy. That's just step one to step two. But having that knowledge of managing people is what's made it work for me.
Awesome. So, Mark, how did you apply for Amazon? If you could, for all the listeners, if we could just a little bit of education of how did you get certified to be a DSP for Amazon, and what actually the DSP means as well.
Sure, exactly. Well, it's a relatively new program. It came out in 2018. Prior to that, Amazon did all their own deliveries. They had their own employees were the drivers. They had their own vans. And then they realized that it could be better suited to be contracted out to a slew of entrepreneurs that had their own businesses, but work with their tools. So they rolled that out in 2018. And I had a friend of mine that had told me about it, and it was really intriguing about it. Had low startup cost. It had the systems already in place. You just had to follow. So it was somewhat like a franchise model, but very low startup cost. So I applied. Took about a year before I ever heard anything back. Did a series of video interviews, telephone interviews, and then finally an in-person interview where they asked a lot of questions about managing people and past business experience. So everything just kind of clicked, and I was lucky enough to get selected. I lived in Jacksonville, Florida at the time, and there was a brand new station that was opening up in Daytona Beach, which is about an hour away. So it worked out great. Within 2 weeks, I was in Seattle doing a training period where you really learn all their systems and their policies and procedures. I was trying to get my business set up at the same time, following articles of organization and bank accounts. Was very I had to do everything, super quickly to be ready for, opening day, which was in a month for the station. So
got it. And thank you, Mark. And how was the transition from the food services to the transportation and logistics? Was it a major shift, or was it pretty similar foundation?
It was a major shift for me. I was in my job for 10 years. I was a district manager for a contract food service company, traveling around managing accounts. And it was okay, but I was ready to do something different. So I think the fact that I was so excited about trying something new and getting into a new field that I just was really gung-ho and ready to learn as much as I could. So it made the transition really exciting, and for me, that's what made it easier.
Awesome. So now fast forward, Mark, how many drivers and how many vans does your company have at this point?
Sure. So it's typically a little seasonal. So right now, being December, we have about 60 vans on the road, and about a little over 100 drivers. They work 4 10-hour shifts. We do 7 days a week. We're only closed a couple of days during the year. So, but in January, it kind of takes a little dip, and we're doing about 75% of that, and that's usually for the majority of the year. But it's great. We do a lot of heavy hiring in October, November to get ready for this. The strong stay on and have a permanent position. The ones that aren't so weak, it's a seasonal job for them.
Got it, Mark. Thank you. And are these most of the employees, are they W-2s or are they contractors?
Nope, they're all W-2s. They make an hourly rate. They have benefits available, and just are proud to have them work for the company.
Got it. That is great. So in this podcast, we normally talk about all the challenges of folks that are in the logistics and transportation space. If you may share with us, Mark, what are the main sort of challenges that the industry on the DSPs and operators are currently dealing with?
So a lot of that, especially earlier this year when there was a lot of unemployment checks, extra unemployment checks going out from the federal and the state. The workforce was just the work pool was a lot smaller than normal. So we really struggled to get sufficient amount of employees. Had to kind of reduce what the standards were a little bit. We used to have a drug-free policy, but we had to transition into you can test positive for marijuana, and that was Amazon actual policy that they changed because the workforce was so small. So when they did that, it actually opened up significantly, which good and bad, that can create its own challenges. But so that we struggled through that through the spring and the summer, just trying to find quality people, getting enough people. Since then,
So if I may, Mark, so when you guys changed the policy, if you could elaborate a little bit, I mean, because I'm assuming there's a lot of folks out there that are high quality caliber, and unfortunately they just got arrested for possession of marijuana, right? So how did you navigate it? How did you put the right systems in place to make sure that you hire the right folks and that they're actually worked out? And I'm sure that just like any other business and other institutions, there's bad tomatoes within that basket, right?
absolutely, yep. So we still do a background check, and we look to see what any charges that they may have. Misdemeanors like marijuana possession is something that we don't really hold against them too much. And we still, if there's an accident or an incident, we still drug test it. If it's a positive for THC, then that's automatic termination. But the actual hiring, there's in Florida, recreation is not legal, but medical is. So there are a lot of people that have their medical cards through the state and smoke to help certain conditions after work or when they're on their days off. But that was definitely a big transition into making that part of it's okay.
Got it. Thank you, Mark. So going back into the challenges, so now that the unemployment is a little bit better, I want to say, and now that you guys have a better pool of employees and drivers, what are the other challenges? Did the inflation hit you pretty hard as well? What are the sort of main challenges that you guys experienced?
Sure. So we've had two pretty significant challenges. The main one is the shortage of delivery vehicles. Cargo vans are hard to find. A lot of the we lease the Amazon branded vans for the majority of the routes, but in our season like this, we have to rent 20 to 30 extra vans from companies like Hertz or merchants, and they're just almost impossible to find. Hertz was our major provider, and then when they went bankrupt through COVID, they sold off a lot of their vehicles and pretty much all of their cargo vans. So that was the biggest struggle, just trying to find enough vehicles. I purchased a few on my own, but they're hard to find. Dealers aren't really stocking them. They're adding $5,000 to $10,000 on top for market adjustment. Used ones are about the same price as new. So that was a really big
Well,
thing that we went through.
thank you, Mark. And how strict is Amazon with these requirements, knowing that there's such a huge shortage of inventory? Can you use personal vehicles, different vehicles? What are the options there?
Sure. So no, they're fairly strict. You can't use personal vehicles. They have opened it up to some other creative ways like box trucks. So we've got about a dozen box trucks from U-Haul that we use right now. They're not the most delivery efficient. You know, when you're doing 180 stops in a day, to have to go back, raise the rolling back door, and that's certainly a little bit of time, but something we had to do to make it work so that we could actually get the right amount of packages out.
Got it. So, do you see, Mark, in the near future, Amazon sort of building their own vehicles to provide to the DSPs or to sell to the DSPs? Can they monopolize that sector too?
Yeah, they contract with other manufacturers. We heavily use a lot of Ford Transits and Rams, and then they have a third party that customizes them to make them more delivery efficient. Most recently, they just got into a contract with Rivian for electric vehicles. Their plan is 100,000 electric delivery vans by 2030. So that's like the next thing that's rolling out, and they've already started rolling out in the West Coast and working really good. A problem that they're running into is a lot of with municipalities being able to service that kind of electricity
Yeah.
demand.
Not having the infrastructure, I'm assuming,
Exactly.
in towns.
Exactly. We were supposed to receive electric vehicles before this Christmas, but our electric company couldn't provide that kind of electricity to service 100 bands. So that's
So they couldn't provide the infrastructure for your facility, or is it mainly in the town in order to get the right mileage for the vans to go around all day long?
I think it's the demand for the actual power, that they couldn't take that much off the grid for that amount of vehicles. So it was the infrastructure, not only building the charging stations, but actually producing enough electricity that could accommodate the city and all these charging stations.
Well, you brought a great point because we actually have a charging station for our New York base, but I'm wondering, obviously, the bigger the fleet, the bigger the station you will need at your facilities. I'm wondering how entrepreneurs and businesses are getting into that space in order to create more opportunities, right? Whether it's charging stations or technicians to collaborate sort of on this initiatives. And I'm wondering what is the biggest obstacle that they deal in order to get everyone into the electrical space within 2030, as you mentioned.
Right. Exactly. I think the demand is there. It's just getting the supply chain and having these companies be able to produce enough vehicles to support all the demand.
Yeah. So Mark, help me understand how it works on your end on with the electrical vehicles and who's paying the bill at the end of the day, because a lot of our listeners are Fortune 1000 companies, transportation managers, meeting planners for transportation authorities and municipalities. And a lot of times, if they have the funds, whether it's an private institution or a public institution, they will contribute to the fees that come along with the electrical spend, but it's not cheap.
Right.
So I'm wondering, on your side as a DSP, who's paying for the electrical vehicles, and how does that contribute to your bottom line, or does it not contribute to your bottom line?
Right. So for me, the cost is ultimately going to be me. I'm the one that has the agreement with the leasing companies. Um, but for something like that, Amazon is going to take care of a lot of the back end things, the charging stations, the parking lots to put them all in. I imagine there's a subsidy for the extra cost of these vehicles, because I'm sure they're a lot more than your typical gas engine. So for me, it's going to be helpful to have them kind of have the background and source all of these vehicles.
Yes, especially so from our personal experience and actually business experience dealing with the electrical vehicles, since they're so new, there's a lot of electrical issues that come along, right? So, what is actually the initiative for DSP providers to go into the electrical space if you're taking the direct cost on your end?
Right.
Like what sort of perks and benefits?
So the perks are that you have these beautiful new high technology vehicles that that your drivers will enjoy driving. They work much more efficiently. It makes me as a business owner know that I'm doing something to help with the environment. And then that's also good marketing. That we're doing our part.
Got it. I could totally relate. However, going back into from a business perspective, is that going to cost you 5% on your bottom line?
Right.
10%?
I would imagine in that 5% era, 5% range. But the benefit,
Is the long
you know, and for me, when as a DSP, if Amazon says, "Hey, you're going electric," we're going electric. So there's not a lot of option there.
let's talk about that model because in the past, as we know, as I brought it up to you, we tried purchasing a couple of DSP companies. What are the downsides and what are the pros and cons of being a DSP and sort of just having that huge client concentration risk with Amazon?
Sure. I mean, the pros are heavy and the cons are heavy. The pros is that everything's a system. They provide the software that the drivers use to navigate them through the day. They give us an office space in their warehouse. We keep everything there. There's no utility costs or rents. Everything is provided, and you just follow a system. And typically, it's pretty well exercised. The cons are almost the same things as Amazon is all in your business. You're at their facility. They have line of sight to your payroll provider. They have access to the cameras in your vans. They know if your drivers aren't wearing their seatbelt. I mean, they really are up into everything, and it's all acceptable ways, but they know everything.
Got it. So you're getting the benefit of a mm, Fortune 1000 company system processes into a small company.
Absolutely,
That
exactly.
awesome. So let's go a little bit into the future and innovation. So if you were to fast forward 10 years from now, where we have either autonomous vehicles and potentially flying cars and drones,
Sure.
how do you see the business of DSP providers being alive and still existing?
Yeah. So I mean, that's pretty exciting. They're already, they've been working with getting the drone technology for quite a while now, and about ready to start doing some testing out in California. Um, but I think that's quite a ways off. The autonomous vehicles are available, and you can get those. But I think as a society, people are hesitant to allow cars to just drive on the road unmanned. We've seen when Uber or Google were doing some testing, it didn't go so well over in San Francisco, and they had to stop the program. But I think we have a while, especially for things as specific as delivery, that you're still going to need that human aspect, at least I'd say in the next 10 years or so.
Got it. So just to challenge you a little bit, Mark, if I may. So for example, in our business where we're transporting passengers, the it's going to be more complicated for society and passengers to adapt to the new norm of getting transported by an autonomous vehicle.
Right.
But you guys are transporting packages. there's no lives involved.
True.
And if you could get all these vehicles and drivers off the road, and literally the package will go into this Amazon storage units that could be placed in all these property managers or houses, where the autonomous vehicle will just have a sort of a component of delivering the package without the human interaction. That is something to think about.
Right. Right. That's where you need to start thinking about diversification into some other industries. But because you're right, eventually that will happen where, I can imagine some kind of locker type system, being delivered by an autonomous vehicle and, come back and pick it up after it's empty.
Yeah. How many years on your end do you think this will take?
You know, um, it's so hard to say, but I would imagine in the 5 to 10 year range.
Awesome. Cool. And switching subjects again, what are you mainly excited about in your logistics space?
So, there's a lot of things. Um, right now, our focus is on, employee retention and keeping and building a workforce that are trying to invest in themselves and help and look at it as a career more than just a job, which a lot of, delivery drivers, it's a situation for a while until they find something better. But we've organized it so that there's opportunity for advancement, becoming lead drivers or dispatchers or managers within the company. And so we've had people that are there right from the beginning. And that's been one of our focus, just to make it a really great place to work.
That is awesome, Mark. Thanks for sharing that. And as a business leader and entrepreneur, how can you continue to expand your business? Is it through Amazon or is it through other competitors in the logistics space? Is it going to the private sector?
Sure. So,
Like,
Amazon does kind of limit what we can do. They only allow DSPs to get so big. You can't go into another station, say, and have another DSP or do, the freight aspect. You're kind of limited, at least right now. I believe that they're looking at, it's still such a young program, going into 4 years in, that there's definitely possibilities later on. But for me, I want to diversify into other companies. There's new, Amazon is one of the only retailers that does their own deliveries for their products. Walmart just starting to get into that field. They have their own kind of delivery service program, and there's going to be other companies that do that as well. So for me, the next steps are getting in with these other retailers or other companies that are designing their own delivery programs and get involved with that.
yeah, that is a great point, Mark, because yes, I do see Walmart getting into the similar delivery space. Same thing with Stop and Shop in our area,
Okay.
in the New England area, where they have all of these vans, but they're operating their vans themselves. And I'm assuming that once they understand how expensive and complicated it is to have and operate your own fleet, they will start outsourcing it. And for us, one of the main KPIs that we track within our business is vehicle utilization. So I'm wondering how you could increase your vehicle utilization per route, where you're delivering packages within the same proximity of the route that is taking place, right?
Right. Exactly. I mean, you could contract with multiple retailers. That would make more sense as far as a cost goes for those individual stores. It's unlikely, one store would have enough deliveries to occupy an entire day. So I think by offering your services to multiple retailers, go around and do your pickups and then your drop offs, that kind of setup could work.
Got it. How about on the private sector, Mark? Is there opportunities for you guys to expand within the private sector, whether it's Fortune 1000 companies or private companies?
Sure. I mean, we have the vehicles. We have a lot of vehicles that aren't Amazon branded, that we could use for other companies in the private sector that might be looking for a similar service.
Awesome. And for all the listeners, Mark, remind us where you're located and where does your business operate?
Sure. So we're in Daytona Beach, Florida. It's a city of probably about 500,000 or 600,000. Not that big. It's mostly tourism, generated, but it's a great place to live. Great place to be working out of.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, Mark, again, thank you for being part of the Future of Ground Transportation podcast. How can our listeners get in touch with you with any questions or potentially do business with you?
Sure. Anybody could email me anytime. My email address is mmorse, which is MMORSE at llandlogistics.com.
Perfect. With that being said, I hope you have a great rest of the day, Mark. Thank you again for joining the podcast, and for all of our listeners, thank you for participating today. We look forward to staying in touch. Please like and subscribe to this podcast. Have a great day.
Thanks, Daniel. You too.